Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in. So, a bit of housekeeping before we begin with anything else. But first, let me check one more thing real quick. Okay, and that should all be good. And how is everything sounding? I have the audio up a little loud so that people can adjust it as they need, so that I feel it's better to be too loud and be able to turn it down than for it to be too soft and not able to turn it up properly, as I in the past have had issues with that particular thing. So, a bit of housekeeping. The reason why I have not been able to stream for the past couple of weeks, well, there I am. So, the reason why is simply because I moved 2 weeks ago, but in the midst of that, my laptop and Switch were stolen. So, unfortunately, that puts a little bit of a damper on my being able to stream for y'all. Now, I was thankfully able to recover some files, such as my model, and my stepfather was kind enough to lend me his Mac. Now, the Mac has many different features than Windows, which I had before. So I'm still fiddling with them as I had never used a Mac before. One such thing is that I was having trouble properly getting what would be considered a gameplay visual, and that's kind of important for myself, for you to see me. I do plan on trying to save up for a proper computer, but I do have to say that unfortunately with the Mac, a lot of the games that I had prepared to play in the future and was currently playing will have to be put on hold because they are not available or do not simply work on the Mac. So, unfortunately, Dragon Age will have to come to an end for now. I do hope that I'll be able to return to it, but for now, we'll have to just simply continue on. Thankfully, I was able to set everything up so that the book readings should continue as planned. Oh, hello, Looney Neptune. Thank you for coming in. I have noticed that my model also moves a little bit delayed simply because it doesn't connect directly to, like, it doesn't get the information directly from VTube Studio. It's a recording of VTube Studio, So even though I'm moving perfectly in time in VTube Studio, it is delayed on stream, unfortunately. But it could be worse things. I've tried to fiddle with it in hopes that it isn't too distracting. And you may also notice a green tinge around me. I will keep playing with that, but unfortunately, the Mac, I cannot get a transparent of my model. I can only do the green screen background, and trying to clean that up around some of the finer points of my model is a little difficult. But I think with this background that I'm using, it's not too terribly jarring. I'll keep fiddling with it, but I want you to be able to see me at the same time. And tomorrow I do hope that I can set everything up so that I can restart my Pokemon Scarlet playthrough. For better or for worse, I had only started and had one episode set up and even uploaded onto YouTube. But unfortunately, with that gone, I'll have to restart. And speaking of YouTube, say hello. Thank you all so much for watching me on YouTube. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much. If you are on YouTube or if you're watching the replay, I would love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel. That would mean the world to me after everything that's happened. But to the people on YouTube specifically, I do hope to create a short or something like that for y'all. I was in the midst of trying to learn how to edit some of my videos together because sometimes my streams would crash and chop up the videos. So I was in the midst of putting them all together and trying to upload them onto YouTube, but for some reason the YouTube would only take the first chunk and not all of the videos. So I think the last Dragon Age and the first Pokemon might be incorrect. If the Pokemon hasn't yet updated for y'all or uploaded for y'all, I might just delete it and re-upload it with the one tomorrow. The issue is that the files that I had messing around with the editing and all that were all on my previous laptop. So I do not have access to those anymore, so I can't play around or fix them anymore. So I do greatly apologize, but I do hope that y'all will be patient with me as we get through this learning curve together. But with that all out of the way, I promise you that I'll continue streaming, even if there is a bit of a learning curve on how to work the Mac. One of the learning curves with the Mac was that it won't even register audio directly from the computer itself. I actually had to download a separate application just so that y'all could have the background music that I like to play, because I can't just connect it or have an audio source directly from the desktop. It has to be picked up by a separate application, which is crazy. But it'll be fine. I'll get through it. I do hope everything sounds okay for y'all. I did play around with it. Oh, hello. Call me senpai or daddy. Hello. You came at a good time. I just got over all the housekeeping and I'm about to start reading for y'all. Once again, let me know if everything sounds okay to y'all. What's up? Nothing much, my dear. Just excited to get into reading some more lovely stories for you all. But without much further ado, I shall continue reading Irish Myths and Fairy Tales for all of you. Oh, why thank you, my dear. I've gotten that compliment many a times, so it must be true. Thank you. That truly means the world to me. So, last, we were starting a whole new sector within the Irish myths and fairy tales. Now, I will once again give the disclaimer that I may not pronounce certain words correctly, but I do always try my best. This new sector is called the Marrow. The Marrow, or if you write it in the Irish, Mordau or Merdrach, from Muir, meaning sea, and Ung, meaning maid. It is not uncommon, they say, on the wilder coasts. The fishermen do not like to see them, for it always means coming gales. For male marrows, if you can use such a phrase. I have never heard of masculine marrow. Of green teeth, green hair, pig's eyes, and red noses. But their women are beautiful, for all their fish tails and little duck-like scale between their fingers. Sometimes they prefer, small blame to them, good-looking fishermen to their sea lovers. Near Bantry, in the late century, there is said to have been a woman covered all over with scales like a fish, who was descended from such a marriage. Sometimes they come out of the sea and wander about the shore in the shape of little hornless cows. They have, when in their own shape, a red cap called a Caholan de Ruth, usually covered with feathers. If it is stolen, they cannot again go down under the waves. Red is the color of magic in every country, and has been so from the very earliest times. The caps of fairies and magicians are well nigh always red. You don't say. Although I have usually heard of purple being considered the magical color. But to each their own, I suppose. Now we begin our first chapter within the Marrow subsector. The first story is The Soul Cages, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. Jack Dockery lived on the coast of the country Clare. Jack was a fisherman, as his father and grandfather before him had been. Like them too, he lived all alone, but for the wife, and just in the same spot. People used to wonder why the Treasury family were so fond of that wild situation, so far away from all humankind, and in the midst of huge shattered rocks, with nothing but the wide ocean to look upon. But they had their own good reasons for it. The place was just the only spot on the part of the coast where anybody could live well. There was a neat little creek where a boat might lie as snug as a puffin in her nest, and out from this creek a ledge of sunken rocks ran into the sea. Now when the Atlantic, according to custom, was raging with a storm, and a good westerly wind was blowing rock on the coast, many a richly laden ship went to pieces on the rocks, and then the fine bales of cotton and tobacco and such like things, and the pipes of wine, and the puncheons of rum, and the casks of brandy, and the kegs of Hollands that used to come ashore. Doonbeg Bay was just like a little estate to the Doughertys. Not but they were kind and humane to a distressed sailor, if ever one had the good luck to get to land, and many a time indeed did Jack put out in his little quarrel, which, though not quite equal to honest Andrew Hennessy's canvas lifeboat, would breast the billows like any ganner, to lend a hand towards bringing off the crew from a wreck. But when the ship had gone to pieces, and the crew were all lost, who would blame Jack for picking up all he could find? "And who is the worst of it?" said he. "For as to the king, God bless him, everybody knows he's rich enough already without getting what's floating in the sea. Though Jack, such a hermit, is a good-natured, jolly fellow. No other, sure, could ever have coaxed Biddy Mahoney to quit her father's snug and warm house in the middle of the town of Ennis, to go so many miles off to live among the rocks, with the seals and the seagulls, or the next-door neighbors. But Biddy knew that Jack was the man for a woman who wished to be comfortable and happy, for, to say nothing of the fish, Jack had the supplying of half the gentlemen's houses of the country with the godsends that came unto the bay. And she was right in her choice, for no woman ate, drank, or slept better, or made a prouder appearance at chapel on Sundays than Mrs. Dougherty. Many a strange sight, it may well be supposed, did Jack see, and many a strange sound did he hear, but nothing daunted him. So far he was from being afraid of marrows or such beings, that the very first wish of his heart was to fairly meet with one. Jack had heard that they were mighty like Christians, and that luck always had come out of an acquaintance with them. Never, therefore, did he dimly discern the Merrows moving along the face of the waters in their robes of mist, and he made direct for them, and many a scolding did Bitty, in her own quiet way, bestow upon Jack for spending his whole day out at sea and bringing home no fish. Little did poor Biddy know the fish Jack was after. It was rather annoying to Jack that, though living in a place where the Merrows were as plenty as lobsters, he never could get a right view of one. What vexed him more was that both his father and grandfather had often and often seen them. He even remembered hearing, when a child, how his grandfather, who was the first of the family that settled down at the creek, had been so intimate with the Merrow that, only for fear of vexing the priest, he would have had stand for one of his children. He would have had him stand for one of his children. This, however, Jack did not well know how to believe. Fortune at length began to think that it was only right that Jack should know as much as his father and grandfather did. Accordingly, one day when he had strolled a little further than usual along the coast to the northward, just as he turned a point, he saw something like to nothing he had ever seen before, perched upon a rock a little distance out to sea. It looked green in the body, as well as he could discern at that distance, and he would have sworn, only the thing was impossible, that it had a cocked hat in its hand. Jack stood for a good half-hour straining his eyes and wondering at it, and all the time the thing did not stir hand nor foot. At last Jack's patience was quite worn out, and he gave a loud whistle and a hail, when the Merrow, or such it was, started up, put the cocked hat on its head, and dived down, head foremost, from the rock. Jack's curiosity was now excited, and he constantly directed his steps toward that point. Still, he could never get a glimpse of the sea gentleman with the cocked hat, and with thinking and thinking about the matter, So, I have no idea what just happened. I think my Mac wanted to update and it kicked me out of everything to update. I'll have to look and see if that is the case, because if that's the case, I need to fix that. Or at least make sure it doesn't do that. Because it didn't act like it crashed. I mean, maybe it could have. So sorry for the technical issues. I'm just trying to bring back up VTube Studio for y'all. As I unfortunately do not have access to my PNGs at the time. But I suppose I could continue reading for y'all so that you do not have to wait in silence while I fix this. One very rough day, however, when the sea was running mountains high, Jack Dockery determined to give a look at the Marrow's Rock, for he had always chosen a fine day before. And then he saw the strange thing cutting capers upon the top of the rock, and then diving down, and then coming up, and then diving down again. Jack had only now to choose his time. That is, a good blowing day, and he might see the man of the sea as often as he pleased. And all this, however, did not satisfy him. Much will have more. He wished now to get acquainted with the Marrow, and even in this he succeeded. One tremendous blustering day, before he got to the point whence he had a view of the Marrow's Rock, the storm came on so furiously that Jack was obliged to take shelter in one of the caves, which are so numerous along the coast, and there, to his astonishment, he saw sitting before him a thing with green hair, long green teeth, a red nose, and pig's eyes. It had a fish tail, legs with scales on them, and short arms like fins. It wore no clothes, but had the cocked hat under its arm, and seemed engaged in thinking very seriously about something. Jack, with all his courage, was a little daunted, but now or never, thought he, so up he went boldly to the colgating fish man, took off his hat, and made his best bow. "Your servant, sir," said Jack. "Your servant kindly, Jack Dockery," answered the Marrow. "To be sure, then, how well your honor knows my name." "Is I not know your name, Jack Dockery? Why, man, I knew your grandfather long before he was married to Judy Reagan, your grandmother. Ah, Jack, Jack, I was fond of that grandfather of yours. He was a mighty worthy man in his time. I never met his match above or below, before or since, for shucking in a shell full of brandy. I hope, my boy," said the old fellow with a merry twinkle in his eyes, "I hope you're his own grandson." "Never fear me for that," said Jack. "If my mother had only reared me on brandy, 'tis myself that would be a suckling infant to this hour." "Well, I like to hear you talk so manly. You and I must be better acquainted. It were only for your grandfather's sake. But Jack, that father of yours was not the thing. He had no head at all." "I'm sure, said Jack, since your honor lives down under the water, you must be obliged to drink a power to keep any heat in you in such a cruel, damp, cold place. Well, I've often heard of Christians drinking like fishes. Might I be so bold to ask where you get the spirits?" "Where do you get them yourself, Jack?" said the Marrow, twitching his red nose between his forefinger and thumb. "Oh," cried Jack, "now I see how it is. I suppose, sir, your honor has a fine dry cellar below to keep them in." "Let me alone for the cellar," said the Marrow, with a knowing with a knowing wink in his left eye. "I'm sure," continued Jack, "it must be mighty well worth the looking at." "You can say that, Jack," said the Marrow, "and if you meet me here next Monday, just at this time of day, we will have a little more talk with one another about the matter." Jack and the Marrow parted, the best friends in the world. On Monday they met, and Jack was not a little surprised to see that the Marrow had two cocked hats with him, one under each arm. "Might I take the liberty to ask, sir," said Jack, "why your honor has brought the two hats with you today? You would not, sure, be going to give me one of them, to keep for the curiosity of the thing?" "No, no, Jack," said he, "I don't get my hats so easily to part with them that way. But I want you to come down and dine with me, and I brought you the hat to dine with." "Lord bless and preserved us," cried Jack in amazement. "Would you want me to go down to the bottom of the salt ocean? Sure, I'd be smothered and choked up with the water, to say nothing of being drowned. And what would poor Biddy do for me, and what would she say? And what matter what she says? you pinking. Who cares for Biddy squalling? It's long before your grandfather would have talked in that way. Many's the time he stuck that same hat on his head and dived down boldly after me, and many the snug bit of dinner and a good shellful of brandy he and I had together, low under the water. Is it really, sir, and no joke? Why then sorrow for me for ever a day and after, if I'll be a bit worse man nor my grandfather was. Here goes, but play me fair now. Here's a neck or nothing, cried Jack. Here, that's your grandfather all over, said the old fellow. So come along, then, and do as I do. They both left the cave, walked into the sea, and then swam a piece until they got to the rock. Now, do you see? The Merrow climbed to the top of it, and Jack followed him. On the far side it was straight as a wall of a house, and the sea beneath looked so deep that Jack almost cowed. Now do see, Jack, said the Merrow. Just put this hat on your head, and mind to keep your eyes wide open. Take hold of my tail and follow after me. You'll see what you'll see. In he dashed, and in dashed Jack after him boldly. And they went, and they went, and Jack thought they were never going to stop. Many a time did he wish himself sitting at home by the fireplace with Biddy. Yet where was the use of him of wishing now, when he was so many miles, as he thought, below the waves of the Atlantic? Still he held hard by the Merrow's tail, slippery as it was, and at last, to Jack's great surprise, they got out of the water, and he actually found himself on dry land at the bottom of the sea. They landed just in front of a nice house that was slated very neatly with oyster shells. And the Merrow, turning to Jack, welcomed him down. Jack could hardly speak, what with wonder, and what with him being out of breath with traveling so fast. Through the water, he looked about him and could see no living things, no barring crabs and lobsters, which there were plenty walking leisurely about on the sand. Overhead was the sea like a sky, and the fishes like birds swimming about in it. Why don't you speak, man? Said the Merrow. I dare you had no notion that I had such a snug little concern here as this. Are you smothered or choked or drowned, or are you fretting after Biddy, eh? No, not myself indeed, said Jack, showing his teeth with a good-humored grin. but who in the world would have ever thought of seeing such a thing? Well, come along. Let's see what they've got for us to eat. Jack was really hungry, and it gave him no small pleasure to perceive a fine column of smoke rising from the chimney, announcing what was going on within. Into the house he followed the marrow, and there he saw a good kitchen, right well provided with everything. There was a noble dresser, and plenty of pots and pans, with 2 young marrows cooking. His host then led him into the room, which was furnished shabbily enough. Not a table or a chair was in there. Nothing but planks and logs of wood to sit on and eat of. There was, however, a good fire blazing in the hearth, a comfortable sight to Jack. Come now, I'll show you where I keep you know what, said the marrow. Did I finally get it going? Finally. Said the marrow with a sly look, and opening a little door, he led Jack into a fine cellar, well filled with pipes and kegs and hogsheads and barrels. What do you say to that, Jack Dockery? Maybe a body that can't live snug under the water. Never the doubt of that, said Jack, with a convincing smack of his underlip, that he really thought what he said. They went back to the room and found dinner laid. There was no tablecloth, to be sure, but why matter? It was not always Jack had one at home. The dinner would have been no discredit to the first house of the country on a fast day. The choicest of fish, and no wonder, was there. Turbots and sturgeons and soles and lobsters and oysters and 20 other kinds were on the planks at once, and plenty of the best of foreign spirits. The wines, the old fellow said, were too cold for his stomach. Oh, well, thank you, call me Sinpar, Daddy. That's so sweet of you to say, especially after my technical difficulties. Thank you so much. Jack ate and drank till he could eat no more. Then, taking up a shell of brandy, "Here's to your honor's good health, sir," said he, "though, begging your pardon, it's mighty odd that as long as we've been acquainted, I don't know your name yet." "That's true, Jack," replied he. "I never thought of it before, but better late than never. My name is Kumara." "And a mighty decent name it is," cried Jack, taking another shellful. Here's to your good health, Kumara, and may ye live these 50 years to come. 50 years, replied Kumara. I'm obliged to you indeed. If you had said 500, it would have been something worth the wishing. By the laws, sir, cried Jack. Yous lived to a powerful age here under the water. You knew my grandfather, and he's dead and gone better than these 60 years. I'm sure it must be a healthy place to live in. No doubt of it, but come, Jack, keep the liquor stirring. Shell after shell did they empty, and to Jack's exceeding surprise, he found the drink never got into his head, owing, I suppose, to the sea being over them, which kept their noodles cool. Old Kumara got exceedingly comfortable and sung several songs, but Jack, if his life had depended on it, could never remember more than rum fuddle boodle doo, ripple dipple nitty dop, dumboo doodle coo, raffle taffle chitty boo. It was the chorus to one of them, and, to say the truth, nobody that I know has ever been able to pick any particular meaning out of it. But that, to be sure, is the case of many a song nowadays. At length he said to Jack, "Now, my dear boy, if you follow me, I'll show you to my curiosities." He opened a little door and led Jack into a large room, where Jack saw a great many odds and ends that Kumara had picked up at one time or another. What chiefly took his attention, however, were things like lobster pots ranged on the ground along the wall. "Well, Jack, how do you like my curiosities?" said old Coo. "Upon my sokins, or soul, sir," said Jack, "they're mighty well worth the looking at. But might I make so bold as to ask what these things, like lobster pots, are?" "Oh, the soul cages, is it?" "The what, sir?" "These things, here, are what I keep the souls in." "Ah, what souls, sir?" said Jack in amazement. "Sure the fish have no souls in them." "Oh, no," replied Coo quite coolly, "that they have not, but these are the souls of drowned sailors." "The Lord preserve us all from harm," muttered Jack. "How in the world did you get them?" "Easily enough. I've only, when I see a good storm coming in, to set a couple dozens of these, and then, when the sailors are drowned and the souls get out of them under the water, the poor things are almost perished to death, not being used to the cold. So they make into my pots for shelter, and then I have them snug and fetch them home and keep them here dry and warm. And is it not well for them, poor souls to get into such good quarters. Jack was so thunderstruck he did not know what to say, so he said nothing. They went back into the dining room and had a little more brandy, which was excellent. And then, as Jack knew it must be getting late, and as Biddy might be uneasy, he stood up and said he thought it was time for him to be on the road. "Just as you like, Jack," said Coo, "but take a stirrup cup or Duke Andoris before you go. You've a cold journey before you." Jack knew better manners than to refuse the parting glass. "I wonder," said he, "will I be able to make out my way home?" "What should ail you," said Coo, "when I'll show you the way." Out they went before the house, and Kumara took one of the cocked hats and put it upon Jack's head the wrong way, then lifted him up on his shoulder that he might launch him up into the water. "Now," he said, giving him a heave, "you'll come up just in the same spot you came down in, and Jack, mind and throw me back the hat." He canted Jack off his shoulder, and up he shot like a bubble, whir, whir, whiz. Up and away he went through the water, till he came to the very rock he had jumped off, where he found a landing place, and then in he threw the hat, which sunk like a stone. I was concerned he would forget to return it. The sun was just going down in the beautiful sky of a calm summer's evening. The score was seen dimly twinkling in the cloudless heavens, a solitary star, and the waves of the Atlantic flashed in a golden flood of light. So Jack, perceiving it was late, set off home, but when he got there, not a word did he say to Biddy of where he had spent his day. The state of the poor souls cooped up in the lobster pots gave Jack a great deal of trouble, and how to release them cost him a great deal of thought. He at first had the mind to speak to a priest about the matter, but what could the priest do, and what did Coo care for the priest? Besides, Coo was a good sort of old fellow, and did not think he was doing any harm. You want me to say I love you in German? Very well. Ich liebe dich. Jack had a regard for him too, and it also might not be much to do his own credit if it were known that he used to go dine the Marrows. On the whole, he thought his plan best would be to ask Coo to dinner and to make him drunk, if he was able, and then to take the hat and go down and turn up the pots. You can German? I studied German for a little bit in my high school years. Some of it has remained. I have thought about relearning it, perhaps maybe even on stream. I can read little bits of it and understand some words. Really? Yes, really. I took 4 years of German in high school. Now, whether or not I was good at it is another story entirely. But I did enjoy learning the language. I'm from Austria. Oh, how fun! I remember being told that Austrian German was a little different from Germany German, but that was what my teacher had told me. But thank you so much for watching, especially from so far away. Danke sehr. You learned German in high school? It is an option. In order to graduate, we had to have at least 2 years of a foreign language of our choice. There was Spanish, French, German, and then later there was American Sign Language added on. I had originally been told that Latin was a language that was available, but unfortunately that did not seem to be true. So German was my second guess. Yes, we do have another accent. Regional accents are always so very interesting. It was, first of all, necessary, however, to get Biddy out of the way, for Jack was prudent enough, as she was a woman, to wish to keep the things secret from her. You from America? Yes, I am from America, in fact. I know my own voice and accent have brought such things up into question, as my voice and accent is very much distinctly different from the region of which I'm from. I do not know why I developed this type of accent. It just simply is how it came to be. Accordingly, Jack grew mighty pious all of a sudden and said to Biddy that he thought it would be for the good of both their souls if she was to go and take her rounds at St. John's Well, near Innis. Biddy thought so too, and accordingly off she set one fine morning a day dawn, giving Jack a strict charge to have an eye to the place. The coast being clear, away went Jack to the rock to give the appointed signal to Kamara, which was throwing a big stone into the water. Jack threw, and up sprang Coo. "Good morning, Jack," said he. "What do you want with me?" "Just nothing at all to speak about, sir," returned Jack, "only to come and take a bit of dinner with me, if I might make so free as to ask you, and sure I'm now after doing so." "It's quite agreeable, Jack, I assure you. What's your hour?" "Any time that's most convenient to you, sir. Say 1 o'clock. You may go home, if you wish, with the daylight." "I'll be with you," said Coo. "Never fear me." Jack went home and dressed a noble fish dinner, and got out plenty of his best foreign spirits, enough for the matter to make 20 men drunk. Just to the minute came Coo with his hat cocked under his arm. Dinner was ready, they sat down and ate and drank away manfully. Jack thinking of the poor souls below in the pots, plied Oku well with brandy and encouraged him to sing, hoping to put him under the table. But poor Jack forgot that he had not the sea over his own head to keep it cool. The brandy got into it and did his business for him, and Ku reeled off home, leaving his entertainer as dumb as a haddock on a good day. Jack never woke up till the next morning, and then he was in a sad way. "'Tis no use for me thinking to make that old Rapiri drunk," said Jack. "And how in this world can I help the poor souls out of the lobster pots?" After ruminating nearly the whole day, the thought struck him. "I have it," says he, slapping his knee. "I'll be sworn that Ku never saw a drop of poteen, as old as he is, and that's the thing to settle him. Oh, and then, is not it well that Biddy will not come home these 2 days yet? I can have another twist with him." Jack asked Ku again, and Ku laughed at him for having no better head, telling him he'd never come up to his grandfather. "Well, try me again," said Jack, and I'll be bail to drink you drunk and sober and drunk again." "Anything in my power," said Ku, "to oblige you." At this dinner, Jack took care to have his own liquor well watered, and to give the strongest brandy he could to Ku. At last, says he, "Pray, sir, did you ever drink any poteen? Any real Mountain Dew?" "No," says Ku. "What's that, and where does it come from?" "Oh, that's a secret," said Jack, "but it's the right stuff. Never believe me again if 'tis not 50 times as good as brandy or rum either. Biddy's brother just sent me a present of a little drop in exchange for some brandy, and as you're an old friend of the family, I kept it to treat you with." "Well, let's see what sort of thing it is," said Kumara. The poteen was the right sort. It was first rate and had a real smack upon it. Ku was delighted. He drank and sang "Rum Bum Boodle Boo" over and over again. And he laughed and he danced till he fell on the floor fast asleep. Then Jack, who had taken good care to keep himself sober, snapped up the cocked hat, ran off to the rock, leapt in, and soon arrived at Ku's habitation. All was well, still as a churchyard at midnight. Not a marrow, young or old, was there. In he went and turned up the pots, but nothing did he see, only he heard a sort of little whistle or chirp as he raised each of them. At this he was surprised, so he recollected what the priests had often said, that nobody living could see the soul, no more than they can see the wind or the air. Having now done all he could for them, he set the pots as they were before, and sent a blessing after the poor souls to speed them on their journey wherever they were going. Now Jack began to think of returning. He put the hat on, as was right, the wrong way, But when he got out, he found the water so high over his head that he had no hopes of ever getting up into it, now that he had not old Kumara to give him a lift. He walked without looking for a ladder, but not one could be found, and not a rock was there in sight. At last he saw a spot where the sea hung lower than anywhere else, so he resolved to try there. Just as he came in, a big cod happened to put down his tail. Jack made a jump and caught hold of it, and the cod, all in amazement, gave a bounce and pulled Jack up. The minute the hat touched the water, away Jack was whisked, and he shot like a cork, dragging the poor cod that he forgot to let go up with him tail foremost. He got to the rock in no time, and without a moment's delay hurried home, rejoicing in the good deed he had done. But meanwhile, there was fine work at home, for our friend Jack had hardly left the house on his soul-freeing expedition when back came Biddy from her soul-saving one as well. When she entered the house and saw the things lying, Trinihala, on the table before her, "Here's a pretty job," said she. "That blackguard of mine, what ill luck I had to ever marry him. He was picked up by some vagabond or other, while I was praying for the good of his soul. And they've been drinking all the poteen that my own brother gave him, and all the spirits, to be sure, that he was to have sold to his honor." Then hearing an outlandish kind of grunt, she looked down and saw Kumara lying under the table. "The Blessed Virgin help me," shouted she, "if he has not made a real beast of himself. Well, well, I've often heard of a man making a beast of himself with drink. Oh, hone, Jack, honey, what will I do with you? Or what will I do without you? How can any decent woman ever think of living with a beast?" With such like lamentations, Biddy rushed out of the house, and going she knew not where, when she heard the well-known voice of Jack singing a merry tune. Glad enough was Biddy to find him safe and sound, and not turned into a thing that was neither fish nor flesh. Jack was obliged to tell her all, and Biddy, though she had half a mind to be angry with him for not telling her before, owned that he had done a great service to the poor souls. Back they both went most lovingly to the house, and Jack wakened up Kumara, and, perceiving the old fellow to be rather dull, he bid him not to be cast down, for 'twas many a good man's case. Said it all came of his not being used to poteen, and recommended him, by way of cure, to swallow a hair of a dog that bit him. Who, however, seemed to think he had quite enough. He got up, quite out of sorts, and without having the manners to say one word in the way of civility, sneaked off to cool himself by a jaunt through the salt water. Kumara never missed the souls. He and Jack continued the best friends in the world, and no one, perhaps, ever equaled Jack for freeing souls from purgatory, for he contrived 50 excuses for getting into the house below the sea, unknown to the old fellow, and then turning up the pots and letting out the souls. It vexed him, to be sure, that he could never see them, but as he knew the things to be impossible, he was obliged to be satisfied. Ah, hello, Armored Horns. Thank you for coming in. I've missed reading for all of you. Thank you for the compliment, though. It truly means the world to me. Their intercourse continued for several years. However, one morning, on Jack's throwing in a stone as usual, he got no answer. He flung another and another. Still, there was no reply. He went away, turned the following morning, but it was to no purpose. As he was without the hat, he could not go down to see what had become of old Ku, but his belief was that the old man or the old fish, or whatever he was, had either died or had removed from that part of the country. That was quite a lengthy story. I don't usually get some that are that long. It's taken me almost a good hour to read through this story, although that did include some technical difficulties. This next story is relatively short, so in lieu of my not being able to stream for 2 weeks, I will gift y'all one more story before I end it for today. But first, I shall take a hydration break. It's always funny to see what sort of face I will make when I take a drink. So, our next story is Flory Cantillion's funeral, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. The ancient burial place of the Cantillon family was on an island in Ballyhigh Bay. This island was situated at no great distance from the shore, and at a remote period was overflowed in one of the encroachments which the Atlantic had made on the parts of the coast of Kerry. The fishermen declare they have often seen the ruined walls of an old chapel beneath them in the water as they sailed over the clear green sea of a Sunday afternoon. However this may be, it is well known that the Cantillons were, like most other Irish families, strongly attached to their burial place for their dead. And this attachment led to the custom, when any of the family died, of carrying the corpse to the seaside, where the coffin was left on the shore within reach of the tide. In the morning it had disappeared, being, as it was traditionally believed, conveyed away by the ancestors of the deceased to their family tomb. Connor Crowley, a County Clare man, was related to the Cantillons by marriage. Connor Machin Crow, of 7 quarters of Braintrach, as he was commonly called, and a proud man he was of the name. Connor, be it known, would drink a quart of salt water for its medicinal virtues before breakfast. Please do not do that, especially if it is raw. And for the same reason, I suppose, double the quantity of raw whiskey between breakfast and night, which at last he did with a little inconvenience to himself, as any man in the barony of Moyfirta. And were I to add Glenderlaw and Ichbrachen, I don't think I should say wrong. On the death of Florence Cantillon, Connor Crowe was determined to satisfy himself about the truth of this story of the old church under the sea. So when he heard the news of the old fellow's death, away with him to Ardfert, where Flory was laid out in high style, and a beautiful corpse he made. Flory had been a jolly and as rollicking a boy in his day as ever was stretched, and his wake was in every respect worthy of him. There was all kind of entertainment, and all sort of diversion at it, and no less than 3 girls got husbands there. More luck to them. Everything was as it should be. All that side of the country, from Dingle to Tarbert, was the funeral. The keen was sung low and bitterly, and according to the family custom, the coffin was carried to Ballyhigh Strand, where it was laid upon the shore with a prayer of repose to the dead. The mourners departed, one group after another, and at last Connor Crowe was alone. He then pulled out his whiskey bottle, his drop of comfort, as he called it, which was required, being in grief, and down he sat upon a big stone that was sheltered by a projecting rock, and partly concealed from view, to await with patience the appearance of the ghostly undertakers. The evening came on mild and beautiful. He whistled an old air which he had heard in his childhood, hoping to keep idle fears out of his head. The wild strain of the melody brought 1,000 recollections with it, which only made the twilight appear more pensive. If 'twas near the gloomy tower of Dunmore, in my own sweet country I was, said Connor Crowe with a sigh. One might well believe that the prisoners who were long murdered long ago there in the vaults under the castle would be the hands to carry off the coffin out of envy, for never a one of them was buried decently, nor had as much of a coffin amongst them. 'Tis often sure enough I have heard lamentations and great mourning come from the vaults of Dunmore Castle. But, continued he, after fondly pressing his lips to the mouth of his companion and silent comforter, the whiskey bottle, didn't I know all the time well enough 'twas the dismal sounding waves working through the cliffs and the hollows of the rocks, and fretting themselves to foam? Okay then, Dunmore Castle, it is you that are the gloomy looking tower on the gloomy day with the gloomy hills behind you. when one has gloomy thoughts on their heart and sees you like a ghost rising out of the smoke made by the kelp burners on the strand, there is, the Lord save us, as fearful a look about you as about the blue man's lake at midnight. Well, then, anyhow, said Connor after a pause, is it not a blessed night, though surely the moon looks mighty pale in the face? Saint Sinan himself between us and all kinds of harm. Gentleman has whiskey loosening his lips, it seems. It was, in truth, the lovely moonlit night. Nothing was to be seen about but the dark rocks and the white pebbly beach, upon which the sea broke with a hoarse and melancholy murmur. Connor, notwithstanding his frequent draughts, felt rather queerish, and almost began to repent his curiosity. It was certainly a solemn sight to behold the black coffin resting upon the white strand. His imagination gradually converted the deep moaning of an old ocean into a mournful wail for the dead, and from the shadowy recesses of the rocks he imagined forth strange and visionary forms. As the night advanced, Connor became weary with watching. He caught himself more than once in the act of nodding, when suddenly, giving his head a shake, he would look towards the black coffin. But the narrow house of death remained unmoved before him. It was long past midnight, and the moon was sinking into the sea, when he heard the sound of many voices, which gradually became stronger above the heavy and monotonous roll of the sea. He listened, and presently could distinguish a keen of exquisite sweetness, the notes of which rose and fell with the heaving of the waves, whose deep murmur mingled with and supported the strain. The keen grew louder and louder, and seemed to approach the beach, and then fell into a low, plaintive wail. As it ended, Connor beheld a number of strange and, in the dim light, mysterious-looking figures emerge from the sea, surround the coffin, which they prepared to launch into the water. "This comes of marrying with the creatures of the earth," said one of the figures in a clear yet hollow tone. "True," replied another, with a voice still more fearful. "Our king would never have commanded his gnawing white-toothed waves to devour the rocky roots of the island cemetery, had not his daughter Derfula been buried there by her mortal husband." "But the time will come," said a third, bending over the coffin, "when a mortal eye our work shall spy, and mortal ear our dirge shall hear." Then said a fourth, "Our burial of the Cantillons is at an end forever." As this was spoken, the coffin was borne from the beach by a retiring wave, and the company of sea people prepared to follow it. But at the moment, one chanced to discover Connor Crowe, as fixed with wonder and as motionless with fear as the stone upon which he sat. "The time has come," cried the unearthly being. "The time is come. A human eye looks on the forms of the ocean, and human ear has heard their voices. Farewell to the Cantillons. The sons of the sea are no longer doomed to bury the dust of the dead of the earth." One after the other slowly turned round and regarded Connor Crowe, who still remained as if bound by a spell. Again arose their funeral song, and on the next wave they followed the coffin. The sound of lamentation died away, and at length nothing was heard but the rush of waves. The coffin and the train of sea people sank over the old churchyard, and never since the funeral of old Flory Cantillon have any of the family been carried to the strand of Ballyoy for convenience to their rightful bury place beneath the waves of the Atlantic. And that, my dears, I do believe we should call it a night. Thank you all so much for joining me today as I read to you the stories from the book The Treasury of Irish Fairy and Folk Tales. Once again, I do apologize for my two-week, I think, absence from streaming. The loss of my laptop, or rather the theft of it, was certainly a frightening thing to deal with, but I'm grateful that family came together to allow me to continue doing this work, as I do truly enjoy reading to you all. As I had mentioned in my schedule that I put up on my Twitter, I will try to stream Pokemon Scarlet tomorrow at 5 p.m. CST. However, if that does not work, I will continue reading stories to y'all. We'll just simply have to see how the technology wishes to work, as it did break down on me a bit today, but thankfully it seems to be holding up. I do wonder if it was just simply an update that the Mac decided it wanted to kick me out of everything to do, or if it crashed and just looked like it was updating. But either way, it's truly wonderful to be back. I do hope I can get everything back to as close to the way it was for you all, so that you can enjoy more streams from me. Now let me see if I have any friends continuing to stream right now. It seems everyone that is streaming right now is of a more chaotic nature. So I think for the sake of those who come to my streams for relaxation, we will leave it here for today. Once again, thank you all so much for joining me today, and I do hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, or night, evening, whenever and wherever you may be watching in the world. You could be anywhere, but you're here with me, and that truly means the world to me. So until next we meet, my dears, I do hope to glimmer you once again. And until then, ta-ta!